Alright, so now we've done the tachos, let's move on to driver regs, which is what the tacho checks your work against and make sure you're being all legal and proper and lovely and sensible. So, all the facts and figures that I'm about to tell you can be found in various places online or in this book, which contains everything I'm about to say on a mere 3 pages. So, as you can probably guess, it contains quite a lot of other useful information on various subjects such as these. And if you want it, it will cost you the princely sum of about 18 or 19 quid, I think, something like that. And it can be purchased from somewhere like Amazon, WH Smith, any other bookstores, maybe their official website if they've got one, etc, etc, you get the idea. Right, where shall we begin? Well, what did we start with? A week is a fixed period that starts from midnight on a Monday and finishes at 23:59 on a Sunday. And you'll find that most of the other rules and regs are based in and around that fixed week period. Such as, in that week, you must show a weekly rest period of 45 hours, which can overlap the beginning and end of one week into the next, and it can be counted for either week, not both, just one or the other. Now, if you so choose, this weekly rest period can be reduced to 24 hours once every other week. So this allows you to work a 6-day week. But the period that you reduce the rest break by then must be added on to another period of 45 hours within 3 weeks of the period in question. So, for example, you have a reduced rest break of 24 hours here. 1 week passes, 2 weeks pass, then the 3rd week passes, then you must have paid it off on that point. So 24, you've reduced it by 21 hours on top of your 45 hours, so you have to have 66 hours by that 3rd week in question. In any 1 week, you can drive a maximum of 56 hours and a maximum of 90 hours every 2-week rolling period. So, for example, you do 56 hours 1 week, then next week you can only do 34 because you will hit your 90-hour limit. And it will make slightly more sense as we move now onto the individual days themselves. A day is any 24-hour period, so there is no fixed point where it can be. You can either have it midnight to midnight or 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. Generally, the start of your shift will be the start of your 24-hour period. So for me today, that would have been at 10 to 1 this afternoon. So all the other rules and regs I now have to fit in with the 24-hour period finishing at 10 to 1 tomorrow. So in that 24-hour period, you must show a daily rest period of 11 hours that can be reduced to 9 hours 3 times a week. Now, by law, there is no maximum duty that you can work, so you can work for as long as you like. However, because of those daily rest requirements, it therefore limits you to a technical maximum of 13 or 15 hours of duty, driving, work, rest, any of the combination in any one 24-hour period. So if you wanted to, you could quite perfectly do a 15-hour day and then have an 11-hour break. However, because the 24-hour period elapses after 9 hours, you've technically only had a 9-hour reduced rest break, so that'll be one of your 3 for that week taken up. So this is some of the things that you have to be careful of when doing this. And if you're going to be catching a ferry or a train at any point and you fancy having a rest break, you're perfectly entitled to. It can, however, only be an 11-hour break, and you can interrupt that 11-hour break for a maximum of 2 periods, totaling no more than 1 hour in total. So you're effectively given half an hour to get on the ferry or train and half an hour to get off the ferry or train. So if it takes you 45 minutes to get on the ferry or train, then you only have 15 minutes to get off. So you will have to be careful about things like that if you're ever doing a crossing. Now, in any one day, 24-hour period, you can drive a maximum of 9 hours, although you can extend that to 10 hours twice a week. So to refer back to the weekly maximums that we mentioned previously, you work a 5-day week doing 9 hours a day. That works out to be 45 hours in a week, which quite conveniently works out at 90 hours for every 2-week rolling period. Or if you have a reduced weekly rest period, you can therefore work now 6 days instead of 5, and you extend your driving to the 10 hours for the 2 times a week that you're allowed. So for the other 4 days, you now do 9 hours driving. That you will find works out to be 56 hours, which quite conveniently is the maximum you can do in 1 week. So you see how it all comes together and they all work together. It's just not a random bunch of numbers that have been picked from the air, because that's what they feel like. These are all carefully worked out and planned. Moving on to the driving now. After 4.5 hours of driving, be that one solid block of continuous driving, or say you're doing multi-drops, so you're starting and stopping and parking up every now and then, it won't reset the counter, it will just keep counting up from where it left off, and eventually you will hit your 4.5 hours of driving. You will need to take a 45-minute break. Now this break can be split into 2 parts if you so wish. The first part must be at least 15 minutes long, and the second part must be at least half an hour. And it must be that way round, it can't be the other way round, otherwise it won't count. But there's nothing stopping you from taking a longer break. If you so wish, you could have half an hour, you could even have up to 44 minutes of rest break, but that first part will only count as 15. So you will still need to have another half-hour block afterwards, even though technically you've reached your 45 way before that. If for some reason you lose or you break your card or whatever, you can't use it in the tachograph, then you can drive without it for a maximum of 15 days from when you lost your card. But you must do a printout at the beginning and end of every shift you do during that period. After 15 days, you're not legal to drive anymore, so you just have to sit at home doing nothing, and it's more than likely your company won't be very happy with you, and they will not pay you because it's not their fault you're not working, it's your fault. If at any point you do happen to stray outside of any of these rules, it is allowed, but only in exceptional circumstances, if only to get the vehicle and yourselves to a legal and or a safe place to stop, or you can have a break or stop and do whatever you need to do. For instance, you're driving along and you get stuck in a traffic jam just a couple miles short of where you're going to pull over and have your break, and unfortunately you end up going over your drive time or whatever. When a situation like that does occur, it's what is known as an infringement, and purposeful or accidental. What you need to do, as soon as you know it's happened, or as soon as you've done it, make a print off, as I've showed you earlier, out of the tacho, and then you write on the back the reason as to why it happened. I was going to have a break, got stuck in traffic just short of where I was going to, unfortunately overran my drive time. That is a perfectly acceptable reason. It was beyond your control, you were going to stop, you were aware that you were near your drive time limit, etc. It was out of your control. Once you've done that printout, you need to keep it about your person, somewhere in your pocket, in your bag, wherever, for a minimum of 4 weeks plus the current week in question, so that's 5 weeks, up to a maximum of 6 weeks plus the current week in question, so 7. And you need to do that just in case that at any point during that period VOSA happen to pull you over and check your tacho, and then they will ask you, why is this infringement here on your tacho records, blah blah blah, and then you simply produce the piece of paper saying, I know it happened, I was stuck in traffic, and here is the printout explaining what and why it happened. And they will be perfectly happy with that. And once that time has elapsed, you simply hand it over to your transport department so they can keep it for their records. So at first glance, we look at those rules and regs and they all look quite complicated and difficult and hard and fast and set in concrete. But if you look at it, there is actually quite a bit of wiggle room. And you will find that there is various loopholes and quite a bit of wiggle room. And you can actually play the system to your advantage quite a bit and still remain legal and above board. But being a responsible driver, I shall not be giving you any examples. I shall leave you to work that out for yourselves if you so wish to. That is basically it for the rules and regs. That's all you need to know. So it's not a massive list, but it does seem quite complicated at first and difficult, but once you get used to it, you'll find out that it is actually quite simple and easy to do. So why don't we move on to the much more difficult process, the Working Time Directive. So on to our last and final part now, that is the dark art of the Working Time Directive. Now, if you're going to get an infringement at any point during the day, your week, month, driving career, whatever, it is more likely than not going to be because of the WTD. Because at first the rules all seem nice and easy and there aren't that many, but the way in which they work is quite mysterious and complicated, and you will find that it's a very strange thing indeed. Now, these rules apply to all workers, not just us truck drivers, so some of them are pretty much irrelevant, or they're superseded by drivers' hours regs and or the mobile workers rules and regs, which is another thing entirely. So we'll just quickly rattle off a few of the irrelevant and pointless ones, such as you're entitled to 20 days holiday a year, you get 11 hours rest a day every 24-hour period, that's covered by driver's hours. You need a minimum weekly rest break of 24 hours, again overruled by driver's hours regs, and you can only work a maximum of 60 hours in any 1 week. I think that particular one is overruled by the mobile workers regs, because you can drive a maximum of 56 hours in a week, so that gives you a mere 4 hours to do other stuff, which is unrealistic really. So all of those rules and regs are either a given or overruled by other stuff. Now the next two rules you need to pay slight attention to, but don't concern yourself too much with them, as they're pretty much taken care of by the company you work for. If you do night work, which means that any point your shift goes through or ends in or starts in anywhere between midnight and 4 AM, you can only work a maximum of 10 hours in one shift. However, that can be overruled by a workforce agreement, which needs to be renewed something like once every 5 years, and with the workforce agreement that basically means that that rule is null and void. You can work as long as you like basically, so you can do a 15-hour day going straight through midnight till 4, no problem. Now the second rule that you have to pay slight attention to is that you can only work a maximum 48-hour week over a 17-week average rolling period. Again, under a workforce agreement, this can be overruled so that you can work a 48-hour week maximum average over a 26-week rolling period. And if you so wish, individually, you can write a letter to your employer saying that you want to be exempt from this rule altogether. So that's all the easy stuff. Just our one final rule remaining, and this is the one that you must know inside out, back to front, upside down, left, right, up, down, all over the place, because if you are going to get an infringement, this is the rule that will catch you out most of the time. And it is, you can only work a maximum of 6 hours without a break, after which you need a 30-minute break. And if you're working more than 9 hours, you're going to need a 45-minute break. Easy? No, I'm afraid it's not, because these breaks can be split up into periods of 15 minutes. So you can have 2 15 minutes for your half an hour, or 3 15 minutes for your 45. So if you work up to 6 hours, you can take just a 15-minute break. And this will cover you up to 9 hours of working, where you'll then need another 15 minutes, so you've had at least half an hour before you get to the 9-hour mark. And then what you need to remember is that you must finish off your 45 or 30-minute break, depending on how much work you've done, before you start your daily rest period, because none of these breaks can be added on to a daily or weekly rest period. They must stand alone as their own separate break period. They're not allowed to be overlapped or joined on in any way whatsoever. So that's all the rules and regs of driver's hours and the WTD and how to use a tacho. Now I could go into quite a lot of detail on the various aspects of the rules and how they work, but that would make this video about twice as long as it already is, and I feel that it's getting long enough as it is already. Probably all I will say before I do go is that these driver's hours regs, needing breaks when and where, and your WTD needing breaks when and where, although these two sets of rules are different, they are measured off just the one set of records from your tachograph. So effectively both sets of rules run concurrently over top of each other, so one break for one thing also counts as a break towards the other. So this is where the massive amounts of complication, and why you quite often get infringements here and there, because you're not calculating your rest break and activity for one thing, you're also doing it for the other thing as well. And that's where the real headache begins to come in. So for now, it's probably best to just leave you with the various rules and regs, and you go out into the big wide world on your own and do your own thing and learn the rules and regs and make your own mistakes and work out how to avoid getting in trouble next time, as it doesn't matter how much attention you pay to your tacho, or how variously or how well you work out everything, at some point you will get an infringement. That is a guarantee. Have fun with that, and I hope you get your head wrapped around it eventually. You will do eventually at some point. It just takes a little while. So until next time, see you then.